Today is May 29th. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Nanago Mekochis Chastakomaki. Hi, my name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. Native Calgarian is being recorded on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed U.S.-Canadian border are the Blackfeet, and north of the border are the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani of the Confederacy. These lands are on Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Stoney Nakoda of the Wesley, Chiniki, and Bearspaw Nations, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nations, Métis, Inuit, status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. I honor the Blackfoot. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, another English name which has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene, or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act imposed status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. My father is so Canadian that I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution while having an Indian Act imposed status card. I acknowledge my Dene lineage and that I was born in Calgary, but my family is not part of the Treaty 7 signatories. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Hare people, also called the Great Bear Lake people, in Treaty 11. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene Nation is a visitor to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many horse town, named after the Calgary Stampede. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as a guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. Any mistakes or misinterpretations will be on me. I encourage questions so that misunderstandings can be cleared up as soon as possible. I do not speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I can share what I know as I walk my red road. If you're experiencing emotional distress after hearing anything we talk about today and want to talk, call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. It is toll-free and open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For non-Indigenous, there are distress center lines in your area too. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. I want to say thank you to the previous donors for already showing your support to our show. If you value listening and can afford to give, thank you. To those that cannot afford to give but listen in, love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com. Send me your questions, your comments. I also have a YouTube channel and would love to have you subscribe. We also applied and just recently got the approval on Spotify, but we are also on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And I want to give a shout out to my super loyal donors, Adam, Alexandria, Beatrice, Brian, Kat, Celine, Christina, Crystal, Diana, Jocelyn, Judy, Karen, Kathy, Kenna, Leah, Marisa, Natalie, Nathan, Rebecca, The Sprawl, Tiffany, Vanessa, and Veronica. So today I'm really lucky to have a guest with me. So Josh, I would love for you to tell us a bit about yourself. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I am a 17-year-old student here in Chestermere, just east of Calgary. I came out as gay 3 years ago. It's been a crazy adventure. I've been trying my hardest to get in the community, show my support, do everything I can to be a part of the community. And lately that has evolved into starting a GSA. I started GSA ELTA about a week ago. It's been a crazy adventure, but fun adventure. Can
I ask you real quick, because our international listeners would want to know what is ELTA, but I think you and I know what that means.
GSA ELTA, so it stands for Gay Straight Alliance Alberta.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the acronym for Alberta prior to the forced 2 digits was ELTA. So a lot of us older Calgarians or Albertans still use ELTA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Well, congratulations. I'm glad you formed that.
Thank you.
So I think we've actually met before at one of the Chestermere
Yes.
Prides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't click to me until yesterday when we were on the phone. So.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to talk to you a bit about, I wanted you to talk about all of the things that you're working on and that, a podcast that you're working on as well. But I also wanted to talk to you about the incredible conversation that we had on conversion band therapy. And I was hoping to talk a bit about Two Spirit because for a lot of folks, my own daughter just told me in the car she identifies as pansexual because Two Spirit is too difficult to talk to non-Indigenous, and that broke my heart. It broke
Mm-hmm.
my heart because we worked so
Yeah.
hard to create a safer space for her, and at the end of the day, enough people don't know what Two Spirit is. So I felt like that would be something I would talk about with you here today, and go from there. So, but first of all, the whole reason why we started talking about or talking yesterday was about podcasting. Did you want to talk at
Mm-hmm.
all about that with me?
About what I am doing.
Yeah.
So every second Friday, I will be hosting Fab Fridays. They are live streams on our Facebook page with guest speakers ranging from drag queens, chefs, parents, anyone. I want anyone and everyone on the show. And we'll speak about different things. Our first one is actually on the 5th of June. And we're going to be talking about the history of the LGBTQ2S plus community in Alberta and North America. We have I have amazing speakers lined up for the rest of June, and yeah.
That's great because one, June is Pride Month, and
Yes.
two, that's next week. That's next Friday. So I got you your last
Yep.
Friday, your last free Friday. So I'm pretty lucky.
Yep.
Now, what's your podcast going to be called?
It's Fab Fridays.
Okay. So that way I'm going to write that down so that I properly put that. But I also want to promote it so that hopefully tomorrow or next Friday, a lot of more folks will be aware of it and mark it in their calendars.
Thank you.
Yeah. What time is it going to start?
We are starting at 6 on Friday, and it will go until James is done talking.
Oh, wow. That's great, though. So at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and I'll just say that for folks that are listening outside of Alberta. So, that's great, Josh. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. And that's on our Facebook page at GSA Alta.
GSA Alta. All right. Well, I can't wait to start promoting that because, so we live in the most eastern community before Chestermere, and I literally was just picking up my daughter from Chestermere from a sleepover because she went to Prince of Peace. So a lot of her original friends were still from Prince of Peace, and some of them have kind of scattered into different areas. And there was a whole issue of me trying to save the stupid school. It's another story for another day. But at the end of the day, my daughter made a lot of good friends, and so we have a lot of ties to Chestermere. And actually, from the city, Joanne has done a lot of great work in diversity. So I try to promote a lot of the events that she's working on because, one, she's a cool cat, but two, I think it's really important that diversity training is constant, ongoing. And every time I talk to somebody from a diverse community, I usually learn something. And I think that that's critical. Like, apparently on the way over here, finding out my daughter doesn't even like to identify as Two Spirit. So for folks who don't know what I'm talking about, prior to colonialism, we had, different roles for everybody in the community. And being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender has always been, like, since the dawn of humanity, we've always had that. So prior to the forced colonial Christian binary of man and woman, we had each nation, so we have hundreds of nations across Turtle Island, and each nation, thousands, I should say, each nation had their own, roles and words to describe different genders of people, and their role varied. So, like, for example, I talked to one Cree fellow, and he was saying that one of the jobs of the Two-Spirit, when a woman was giving birth, they'd have two teepees, and the one that the women were giving birth in, and another one where the Two-Spirit would be in there and mimic screaming in hopes to attract any negative energy into that teepee and keep the baby and the birthing mom safe. So all of our teachings, depending on what nation you're from, vary, as do the words to describe all of these things. And what had happened was that there was a group of gay, lesbian, indigenous folks that all gathered, and they said, basically, because the non-indigenous community doesn't understand us, we should have a new pan-indigenous term to describe ourselves. And that's how Two-Spirit was invented. So we've had to invent a lot of words in our own languages with colonialism, but we also have had to invent, English terms for colonialism. So Turtle Island is North America. And, every nation has a way that they would describe the land and would have different terms for that. So it's a cultural shift, I think, for Canada, especially considering that they now seem to care about Indigenous people enough to, talk about reconciliation, although that really is the wrong term, because that probably conciliation is a better term to use. And then with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women report that came out, there are very specific calls to justice for the, those who identify as Two-Spirit, gay, lesbian, and the other problem that happened, and we have it in my own family. My family survived in Fort Providence, Sacred Heart Indian Residential School. And as a result, they taught homophobia and transphobia. And that's, rampant throughout all of the nations now. And so a lot of our LGBTQ2 plus youth are actually not that safe. They can't really come out, and they may not be able to come out to family. They may not be able to come out to their reserve. But then when they come into the white community, they're not accepted because they're not white. So there's been a lot of erasure of Indigenous people from this conversation. And as a result, and homophobia and transphobia through the Christian teachings that were forced upon these lands. So we're trying to, have these conversations. And that's why I thought it was so critical that you come and talk about this, because I'm finding that, I'm willing to talk about reconciliation and race relations between settler and Indigenous people. But then as a straight cis mom, I've called my daughter questioning, pansexual, Two-Spirit, and someday she's not comfortable with the term Two-Spirit because there's a lot of folks in the community that say you need your teachings. So one of my nieces is transgender, and I asked my community, well, what was the term for somebody? And it actually turned out we didn't even have terms for she and him. We had they. We always used they and them, and that helped give me a new perspective on using they and them, because that was such a foreign concept to me as a straight cis person. I had no concept how to use those types of pronouns. Another story I should quickly share with you is that my babysitter was originally a girl named Samantha, who then transitioned into Orion. So we were really lucky to go through that with my daughter, but also the mother. I got to, learn how to use terminology, pronouns, and learn not to use the dead name, things like that. So it's it's been a learning journey for me too, but that's helped me advocate for the folks in my community that need that. And especially when we talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, there's always that missing part of Two-Spirit and transgender. And they are, the most marginalized people because they're not necessarily safe anywhere. And as you know, police brutality is awful to anyone in the LGBTQ2 plus community, let alone Indigenous. So there's that intersectionality. It's like literally a health issue. And and I also wanted to tell you, I'm in the middle of reading Gay Calgary from Kevin Allen with my daughter. So we just do a chapter a night. And because the chapters, are so short that like it's just like almost like a page a night. So it's going to be a while, but you know it's worth it. And then hopefully that keeps her kind of focused on our history. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I've
yeah.
never heard of that book. I should check that out.
Yeah, I have a copy, so I guess I can't lend you mine right now because I'm in the middle of it. But you know, if you head down to Ferris Fair, or actually, I should do a plug for Gay Calgary History by Kevin Allen because it's a great book, and I think every Calgarian should be forced to have it. And I consider Chestermere as a satellite city, you know, a Calgarian. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, how
Hmm.
do you feel about that? How do you feel about a Calgarian calling Chestermere a Calgarian?
Well, we are our own city, so well, we're a subdivision, I would say. We're getting close.
Hmm.
I'm biking distance with Calgary, so we could say we're Calgarians pretty much.
That's funny. So did you were you born and raised in Chestermere, or did you move
Yep,
there? Oh,
I've spent all 17 years of my life in Chestermere.
you want to tell me a bit about the foundation of Chestermere Pride?
So, Chestermere Pride, I joined last year. About halfway through the planning process, they called me and they're like, "We need your help. Can you come help us?" And I said, "Definitely. This is what I want to do. Chestermere needs this. Like, we need this celebration." So I joined. We did the planning, all the like funding, everything, got it all set up. And then we had the paintings. So we did the sidewalk painting. We painted the transgender sidewalk, and then the gay pride flag sidewalk.
Yep.
And then we also had Pride in the Park, which was a blast. We had a local singer. We had drag shows. We had a whole bunch of resources, a photo booth, and then we had a free barbecue as well for everyone. So it was a blast.
Yeah, it was great. I was totally there, and
Yep.
I remember seeing all the booths, seeing all my friends. Actually, Chantel was one of the opening. You know, as a two-spirit person, I think it's really important she does the opening. So that was really great that you know you, Joanne, and the whole group had her there. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and the barbecue was great.
Yep.
I loved it. So thank you. It was great
Well,
to be a
thank
part
you.
of that. Yeah. So this year, I guess I don't know if you know much if there's going to be a celebration at all.
So, from what I've seen online, well, I broke away from the group. From what I've seen online, they have canceled their Pride in the Park and they've canceled all of their celebrations due to COVID. Um, I don't know if they're doing anything online. I was trying to get a meeting set up with them, but it would still be great if they could do something online.
Yeah.
So,
I work a lot with Calgary Pride because, well, you know, they got their grant too, and we knew before they announced it that they were going to put everything online. So we were really excited about that and trying to get some speakers to tell their truth about, you know, what it's like being Two Spirit in Calgary. But it's going to take time to set that up for Indigenous folks because we've been studied and misused. One of the concerns that we always have is who has ownership, who has control, who
mhm.
has possession of you know of these stories. So that's really where we're at right now is just trying to get that contract set up and then getting the right filmmaker. But it's been like it's so challenging with COVID because like
Yeah.
even me, I don't know if I'm going to be homeschooling my daughter next year or not. I don't know how comfortable I feel sending her, considering you know we don't really know what a second wave is going to look like yet,
Mhm.
and quite frankly, we have so many like conservative politicians. Like Trump is in the south of the border, and I'm not very happy with what I've seen here in Alberta. So you know, it's really hard to know what what to expect, and we'll go from there. So, and then anyway, another big development that happened this week was um, riots in the U.S. based off the
Mhm.
killing of that black man, and you know, it's really personal to us as in the Indigenous community because the same cop that killed him was also involved in killing an Indigenous man.
Mm-hmm.
and there's no accountability for that. So between that and then the week before with the conversion ban therapy, it's actually been really hard on our community. But thank
Mm-hmm.
God that bylaw passed. So what are your thoughts on that bylaw?
I think it's great. I actually sat through both days of speaking. I listened to everyone speak. My parents were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm listening. I want to listen to what these people have to say. I want to listen. I know it hurts me to listen to all these people say that it's a good thing, but I want to hear what they have to say." Um, so I listened to all of that. I waited every step. And yeah, I definitely think it's a good thing. I think it needs to be done provincial and federal.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a good step forward, but they need to step up. Like Trudeau and Jason, they need to step up and do something about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As far as I understand, Jason Kenney's brother is actually one of the folks who runs those conversion therapy groups. So, as far as I know, Jason Kenney would probably be the last person on earth to have that
Yeah,
discussion.
yeah. So I thought I read somewhere that and don't fact check me on this, but I thought I saw somewhere that there was a group before Jason came into office that was actually starting to do the process of doing a ban in Alberta.
There was
Um,
under the
and then
NDP.
Jason came in, shut it down. Um, but there is still a group doing it, but they're doing it much slower because of Jason.
Yeah,
So
the
it's
NDP had it
it's
going, but I don't know if you know, I ran as a liberal, and they had every opportunity to implement it, but they chose not to. They actually chose to make it, an election issue, which was stupid because now they've
mhm,
totally failed the community. So
yeah.
yeah, and I don't know if you know, but my leader, he's like openly gay, and he's brown. So he was somebody I could definitely stand behind when it came to this issue. So um, yeah, and I'm really disappointed. And then conversely, I'm also a liberal federally, and we promised to do that last election that we didn't do. So,
Yeah.
it's a real black eye, I think, on Justin Trudeau to not have done this sooner. But my understanding is that a lot of folks nationally were waiting to see what would happen in Calgary because Calgary is kind of considered the stronghold for the Christian right. So the fact that it got passed, and it would have been unanimous if it wasn't for one counselor. So, you know, and Jeremy Farkas was shockingly, loud and out about not just his sexuality, but his stance that he would support the bylaw. And he, out of all people, would have been one of those people I was not sure if he would, even though he identifies as bisexual. I didn't have faith in him on that
Mm,
issue at all. So I was really happily surprised that he came out so strong on this issue.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, talking about what Kenny is doing, it brought up a point in my head with GSAs and the schools. That's another reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I know next year, if there is school next year, students won't be going to school GSAs because of what teachers can now do. I know my stepmom's a teacher, and I'm very close with the teachers at my school, and they all said they wouldn't do anything. They are not going to do anything. But there's the few teachers that will, and that's what's going to scare everyone away. So
Yeah.
that's one of the big reasons why I want to do what I'm doing, because I'm not controlled by him. I don't have to do what he says. So
I'm really happy that you're doing this because, like, for me as a parent, the Center for Sexuality here in Calgary was talking about doing online GSAs. And I think they had at least one, and I don't know if I got out of the
mhm,
loop on that. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important to have some type of GSA for kids, even if it's through a Zoom meeting or
mhm,
whichever, so that everyone has a soft place to talk, and especially after the stupid conversion therapy conversation. So basically, for 2 days, for those who missed it, we heard, the Christian right talk about their rights as
yeah,
people and how their rights matter so much, which is hysterical to me as an Indigenous woman who's lost her language, culture, land, and you know they they don't even recognize me as one of the people that that voice matters when talking about the calls to justice. So we have a very complicated relationship, and it's so hard when officially the city of Calgary is talking about reconciliation, but it was so painfully obvious from that conversation. They engaged with everybody except me when it came to that conversation, because it was so not part of their script of what they're used to the Christian right talking about. So yeah, so that was it was painful, actually. And I kept thinking about what my family had to endure in residential school, hearing how inferior they were and how they were going to hell and how they were, the devil's creature, and knowing so many folks who have survived conversion therapy, hearing the things that they've said to them, it's awful. And that, I follow Katie Lang, and a lot of her followers couldn't believe that that was still even a thing here in Canada.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with us, Josh?
Not that I can think of. Do you have any other questions? I can answer anything.
Yeah. Well, I guess. So we've figured out that you're going to call your GSA, GSA Alta, and have
GSA Alta.
regular, sorry?
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then have the Fab Fridays at 6 p.m. And you're going to do this until. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with us about some of the projects that you're working on with podcasts and such?
So, so I do the Fab Fridays. We're going to do them every second week with different guest speakers. They'll all be streamed on our Facebook page. And also in our Facebook page, there's a group through our Facebook page, which is open to anyone. Anyone can post. Anyone can do anything they want. Well, within reason, on the group. That's the place where I want everyone to have a space to talk. And then after COVID, hopefully, if I can get the spaces, I want to do in-person GSAs in Chestermere, and then I want to do one in Calgary as well. So
that'd be awesome. Well, thank you for doing that work.
And I don't want to stop the online ones. I want to go online like even after COVID, just so there's a space and there's enough speakers in the world to have someone every second Friday. I'm going everywhere. I have people from the US reaching out to me, so it's amazing.
Yeah, no kidding. There was a playwright and activist who just recently passed away. Did you hear anything about that?
I think I just heard his name. I didn't really see anything about it.
He's one of the, people give him the rights as the person who really forced governments to give AIDS, I guess, victims. I don't like using that term. People who have AIDS and HIV, the proper medical supplies that they need. He was really the person who did that. So that was somebody that I thought was really, important to kind of ask you if you knew about that.
Yeah, I think I just saw it yesterday or day before. So
yeah, there you go. And what about Stonewall? What are your thoughts about Stonewall?
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of a trick question. So Stonewall was kind of another place where gay rights was really started. And there was a lot of trans Black women who started the rights for, the major parades really that we see today, because the police were targeting the community in New York at a place called Stonewall Inn. And that day they just had enough and started rioting. And the next day they basically had a riot protest as well to say, you got to quit doing this. And that's really how Pride was started, all prides. And I think it's really important for our youth to kind of understand the gravity of that. And then the exclusion of, trans and Black women, considering they were really the founders. They were the ones who punched back to the police, which is very interesting considering the time we're in right now with Minnesota basically rioting.
Yeah. And actually, so the history of the community, that I'll be learning a lot about it on Friday, and I hope more people can learn about it that don't know what the history is. So
Well, I love hearing James speak, and I love hearing
Hmm.
about that history. And if it can convince my girl to be a part of it, then I will, because I think this is more for her to understand too, that she understands her history. But I was one of the co-founders of Voices, and it was very clear to me that even the uh, community was unaware of where Pride really came from and where Stonewall
Hmm.
really meant for the community. And it was really a critical time to do that education because of the racism that people of color, brown people, indigenous are facing locally, the exclusion. And we want to make sure everybody's included. And I'm a little biased because I have an indigenous daughter, so yeah. Do you
Yeah.
want to tell us at all about your journey? Have you found that having coming out was easy for you? Do you think that it was a hard conversation?
So I came out, it was, when was that? I think it was my 14th, just after my 14th birthday. And I came out on Facebook. I just put a post out and I said, here it is. Here's my true colors. I am gay. And that was the best feeling, was just getting that off. Just everyone found out at the same time. My parents were like, oh, we knew. There's no surprise. I have very accepting parents. I have very accepting family. I have gay uncles, gay aunts. So,
That's great. I'm really happy to hear that. When I was about your age, actually, I would have been a bit younger, was Katie Lang came out, and I didn't even know what a vegetarian was, let alone what a lesbian was. So there's been a huge shift. And the conversation that I'm reading in Gay History of Calgary right now is actually about that time in the 70s where a lot of gays that were happily in the closet um, didn't want to be seen as flamboyant. And there was a real push from the campuses to be like, no, you need to have that inner pride and you need to
yeah.
be open and honest about who you are. And that was a really hard time for a lot of people. And I just recently had a conversation with someone who was like really, afraid to come out, but they would go to, at that time they had basically secret parties. So I would host a so-called party, and it really was just a safe space for gay people to hang out. And there would be, judges and lawyers and police that were there that you could say, look, we are really important people, and look at the people that are here at this party. Like we are really influential. And that's what it took
Mhm.
for that pride to really come out in that person to be like, it's okay to be gay. So it's been a big transition even in my life, and I'm only in my 40s, so I can't imagine. I'm happy to hear in your lifespan that you get to just be you. You don't have
Yeah.
to worry about that. So it makes
Hmm.
me happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you have an auntie in the east part of Calgary for you anytime if you need another auntie. All right. Thanks, Josh, for being on my show. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Not that I can think of.
Awesome. Well, I am going to continue on my script, and if at any point in time you want to chime in, please do. So
Okay.
basically, what I do now is what I call cultural solutions for folks, and I name, a lot of the um, resources for people so that they have an idea of where to look for different things. And through this conversation, obviously, we're plugging Fab Fridays, we're plugging GSA Alta, and I've plugged Gay History. And of course, we want to encourage people to come for your first one on Friday, next Friday. So, I think it's one thing to talk about the issues of the day, but if you don't give solutions, then people won't
Hmm.
know. So I'm just going to finish out by giving out some cultural safety. Indigenous have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and in public hearings, so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties. Listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, know that your vote to that party directly negatively impacts marginalized people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform and violence prevention, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit. Denying those reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism at the educational, justice, and health institutions with multiple reports that say the same things. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they do not understand colonialism, racism, privilege, and sexism, they literally have no business running. This should be understood by all parties and all local politicians, community organizations, sports, etc. A really great article I said out loud in episode 62 is Truth Before Truth, how non-Indigenous Canadians become allies. And this week, especially with the shootings, the riots that are happening in Minnesota, I've shared multiple resources for white allies on how to be an actual ally that does something. I want to put together some cultural safety in action so that you can create a safer space for Indigenous, people of color, Asians, those with a disability, LGBTQ2+, to speak. Look at it as first aid for marginalization. Do something. Having good intentions is not enough. Take action to make change. Speak out against racism. Ask questions with those with more of understanding. Find allies and create a support system for yourself so that you can help advocate for culturally safe approaches. Take responsibility for your own learning. Read, reflect, ask questions. Do not expect this learning to always come from marginalized people. So like we've told you, lots of resources for LGBTQ2+ today. And I've always given lots of resources for anti-racism. Take the time for self-reflection. Beware of your assumptions and biases. Question everything you've learned about Indigenous people and take steps to actively disrupt the stereotypes. Commit to lifelong learning. Be prepared to be uncomfortable. Understanding colonialism and the legacy of racism is an ongoing and difficult task. And I'd like to thank heretohelp.bc.ca Indigenous people, what is cultural safety and why I should care about it for that resource. Internalized racism, or lateral violence, is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized people experience by the structure of racism imposed on these lands, such as the Indian Act, Indian residential schools, and other land clearing policies. If you go to racialequitytools.org, Donna Bevins has a great PDF on what is internalized racism. And so if you are one of those people in community that is constantly being hurt by somebody else from your community, this is what you need to read so that you don't internalize that. Do's and don'ts for bystander interventions by American Friends Service Committee. They have a ton of stuff of what to do. If you witness public instances of anti-trans, anti-racist, or of anti-Black, anti-Muslim, anti-Asian, instances of racism or other forms of oppressive interpersonal violence and harassment, use these tips on intervening while considering the safety of everybody. Make your presence known. I record everything, and that usually de-escalates a lot of the situations. Make eye contact with the person being harassed. Ask them if they want support. Move yourself nearer to the person being harassed if possible. And if you're safe to do so, create a distance or barrier between you and the person being harassed. If it's safe to do so and the person consents, film or record the incident. It's a hell of a lot easier to delete it later than it is to watch somebody die in front of you because a cop put their knee on their neck. And this is literally why we're having these conversations. I made a post about this, that when the LA riots happened, we didn't have the technology that the kids today have, where you can record everything on your phone and you can upload it. We didn't have internet infrastructure. There was no Twitter to upload it to so everybody could see it. So you don't understand how just recording things can de-escalate things. Take cues from individuals being harassed. Is the person engaging with the harasser or not? I.e., are they telling them to, F right off? And don't tone police them if they are. Make sure if you feel comfortable making suggestions, that you ask them things like, do you want me to come walk over here? Do you want to move to another train car? Do you want them to leave you alone? I always encourage folks to give your card to them. Validates their experience, and then later, if they decide they want to press charges, they know they at least have one witness to help back them on that. Start documenting, make a note of the time, place, the description of the harasser, because these are the things the cops are going to want to know. Notice if the person being harassed is resisting in their own way and honor that. Do not tone police. I cannot say that enough. Follow up with the individual. So that's why you give them their card. Usually at the time when these moments happen, I can speak for myself and tell you, most people just want to, brush it off and be like, that didn't really happen. But as I was reminded by the Calgary police, it is really important for us to consider reporting. And I encourage people to try to do that. But first and foremost, you have to keep yourself safe. Assess your surroundings and see if you can pull others in to support it. So like if it was me and my husband or me and my friend, we should probably stay and work as a team. And don't call the police. For many communities experiencing harassment right now, from Arab, Muslim, Black, queer, trans, Indigenous, and immigrants, the police can actually cause a greater danger for the person being harassed. Don't escalate the situation. The goal is to get the person being harassed to safety, not incite further violence from the attacker. Don't do nothing. Silence is dangerous. It communicates approval and leaves victims high and dry. If you find yourself too nervous or afraid to speak out, move closer to the person being harassed and communicate your support with your body. Teach your kids accountability. And, I just shared some information about age-appropriate times to be talking about kids about racism and race relations, because these kids are learning it from somewhere. People have learned it from somewhere. So you as a parent have a role to be proactive in teaching your kids about race relations. And right now it's just so apparent while we're talking and people are rioting. If you're experiencing emotional distress and want to talk, call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. It is toll-free and open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you are non-Indigenous, call the distress centers in your area. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, without tone police, without leadership shaming, without gaslighting questions. As many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinion, sure want to tell us theirs by people who know nothing about Indigenous people, colonialism, the constant surveillance of our people, our protests, our vigils, and our rights, typical microaggressions, people dealing with internalized racism, those who are gatekeepers, those that survive off the status quo, or those who are so in their trauma, they stop people from doing the good work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for Indigenous people. And that's why I started this podcast, as a boundary to be heard. I want to say thank you to my ancestors, my granny and my mom, of what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian roots, and stepping up and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her that I am a second generation proud Calgarian. Thank you to my husband, Darcy, for producing and editing this show. On top of being my husband, childhood friend, father of our child, and support down my journey of the Red Road, he has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, who we are blessed to learn from daily, we are really honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. And I hope my daughter and my family will be proud in the future of trying to discuss these present day issues in a way that they can understand. Again, my Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, Adam, Alexandria, Beatrice, Brian, Kat, Celine, Christina, Crystal, Diana, Jocelyn, Judy, Karen, Kathy, Kenna, Leah, Marisa, Natalie, Nathan, Rebecca, and the Sprawl, Tiffany, Vanessa, and Veronica. Thank you all for signing up. If you did one donation or many and had to quit for financial reasons, please know I appreciate your support. If you value listening and can afford to give, thank you. To those that cannot afford to give but listen in, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. I also have a YouTube channel and would love to have you subscribe. And for podcasts, we are on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And I want to end by giving those side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not Tradish. And my beautiful cousin would respond, or you'd be in my dish. Thank you for listening.